I get asked quite often about my exact workflow on processing images here in Lightroom. Today, I'll go through step by step everything I do on a typical develop session for wildlife images here in Lightroom. Plus, I'll show you some tips how to really speed up your image processing. Now, you'll want to stay tuned for that. Lightroom workflow for wildlife coming up. Hi, I'm Terry Vanderheide, professional photographer. Today I'm showing you the steps I take in Lightroom to process wildlife images. Now, everyone has their own unique way of working inside of Lightroom. There's not necessarily a wrong way per se to work in Lightroom, but I'm going to show you how I do it inside of this program. And if you have a different method or you have suggestions on how this process might be improved, then please feel free to share them in the comments section below. If you process a lot of images like I do, then speed in Lightroom is paramount. I want my images done right, of course, but I also don't want to waste a lot of time working on them. What you might learn today will possibly help you do all of your work right here inside of Lightroom without ever having to bring your image into Photoshop. I'll show you how I personally work in Lightroom, so let's get to it. So in here we've got a couple images of a Harris hawk that I photographed. And I've got a few of them here to look at. So generally when I'm culling images, what I'm going to do is bring them up. What I like to do too is come over here and I click this little triangle and that'll make this panel go away. And that just gives me a little more space to look at these images. I also like to zoom them up to like 100% to see what I'm looking for and making a decision as to what it is that I'm going to try to look for in a particular image. So in Lightroom, the zoom tool, just clicking on it will zoom it when you're in the library mode. And then of course it turns into a little hand so you're able to move it around and look at it. So on this one, I can see that I caught my focus right here on the side of the bird's head. So this one's out. We're not using that one. And let's take a look at this one. It's getting closer. You can see we've got some focus right in here. The beak is out of focus, but the eye is starting to get in focus. And if I have to choose, I'm going to choose the eye to be in focus. But let's continue on and keep looking at what we have here. Well, now there's one that looks pretty good. The whole beak is in focus. The eye's in focus. The head's in focus. All right, I like this one the best so far. So I'm going to right click and I'll just add a color label to it and we'll make it red so I can see it later. But let's move on and take a look, see if there's anything better. Nope, I missed the focus on that one and on that one and on that one. So out of 8 images, one's in good sharp focus. And to me, sharp focus is something that's the most important thing. The first thing I do is I look for how sharp an image is in terms of how it looks on the screen. And I want to make sure that it's nice and sharp, at least at 100%. So I can see that this image is sharp. It does have some things that I want to change on it, but this image looks pretty sharp. So let's go ahead and work with that. So we're going to go over into the develop module. And as we look at this, a couple things that I want to do first is this twig is a little annoying. So I'm going to come over here, grab my remove tool and make a small brush. I make the brush as small as I can make it to fit over what it is I want to remove. And let's go ahead and drag that down and see how that looks. All right, that's pretty good. That removed that, so that distraction's out of there. Now, we have a lot of space over here, so I don't necessarily need that space, so I'm probably going to do a little slight crop here. So let's go ahead and crop this a little better. We'll just crop it like, let's see, let's get his eye over into this third quadrant here. So yeah, right about like that. Let's take a look, hit enter or return on the Mac. Okay, I like the crop. Everything looks good. So now I got to do a little bit of work on the rest of the image. So generally what I'll start doing is I'll start going into masking. So let's go ahead and hit mask and we'll hit brush. And when I'm creating a brush or looking for a brush to use, I can easily take and create whatever exposure I want to make on this brush. So let's say I want to really increase the exposure, and when I drag this across, I'm lightening that whole area. We'll undo that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use pre-made brushes. So if I come in here and grab brush again. Come over here and go to custom, and I've made a bunch of brushes already. So these are brushes that you can buy on my website. They're available there on the website if you'd like to buy them. But I'm going to give you some tips today on how to make your own brushes if that's something you want to do. But this is pretty simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Iris Highlight, click on that, and that's the brush. And you'll see, let's undo that for a second. And let's go back in, and we're going to go into brush, masking, then brush, and you'll see here that we've got Iris Highlight. So let's just go back to, we'll just go to exposure, leave it on that. That's one of the ones that Lightroom gives you. And if you look at the exposure here, see the difference in the exposure of everything is set normally, right? So if I come into one of my brushes and click on iris, you'll see that all those parameters are in place already. So that's the value of having brushes already built, is that all those parameters are already in place. So what we're going to do is zoom up to this, and let's see at 100%. Let's go ahead and move over here. I use the space bar, turns into a little hand so I can move it around. And now what I'm going to do is just go in and try to lighten the eye. So we'll just come in here, and this is what you can see the mask that it leaves, and we're just trying to lighten the eye. And then we're going to come in and make a new mask. So that's pretty simple. Come up here, hit the plus key, and we'll do another brush mask. This time we're going to go to the next brush that I have in my series, and that's going to be the Iris Highlight 2. Let's come in, we'll make this brush a little smaller, and you can see that the brush has that little ring around it. What that ring is that has to do with the size and the feather. So the feather of this brush, you can see there's no feather, and then here there's about 60 or 70% feather, and you'll see the ring around it. So that's a softer transition on the brush. So let's go ahead and brush a little bit more, and now we're getting a little more definition in that eye. So that's starting to look pretty good. Let's do another mask. We'll click and do brush again. This time we're going to go to the next one in order. I put these in order for a reason, and this is the Iris Enhance. So we'll come in here, make this brush a little bit smaller, and start painting in the iris. All right, so you see how that's not only bringing up the detail in the iris, but it's also bringing up some warmer color, saturating the color. So let's go ahead and do another one. Another brush. You can see that I'm going to stack a whole bunch of these masks on top of one another, and that's fine because that allows me to go back to them if I want, and it's a pretty simple process. So let's go ahead and go back to the next brush that I have, and we'll go to Eye Highlight. So Eye Highlight, what that does is that's going to really pump up the exposure. You can kind of see every time you click to a new brush, you can see the details here of what that brush is expected to do. So we're going to go and make this pretty small, and what we want to do is we want to really bring out this highlight here. So I'm just going to brush over that highlight, and that's going to be that highlight. Now that seems a little harsh, so what I'm going to do is reduce the opacity of that. So the way to reduce the opacity of that is to slide this backwards just a little bit. And there, that looks a little bit better, a little more realistic in terms of the highlight brush. That's the eye highlight brush. So let's make a new brush. Click, go down to brush. See, I'm just stacking up these masks. It's okay to do that. And let's go into the next brush, and that's going to be eye dark. So this is where a brush that I've set up in order to darken in stuff like this pupil, right? So this pupil now got a little too bright, a little too out of control. So I'm going to be able to darken that quite a bit. Now let's pull back and see what we've got. That looks pretty good. If we do our little keyboard shortcut of the slash, the backward slash, that'll turn off everything that we've done. Give us a before and after. So that's looking pretty good. So let's zoom up again. And let's see the next thing we're going to do. Let's make a new brush. Pretty simple process, right? You're just making a new brush and going along and building on as you go. So that next one down is going to be Beak Enhance. So I do this kind of in order because this is the order that I like to work in. So I'm going to grab my brush this time, and I'm just going to be painting over the beak. This lightens it a little bit, adds a little more saturation into the yellows. There, just like that. And let's go ahead and make another new brush. And this one, we're simply going to darken down an area that we have here. So how do we do that? We're not going to grab a new brush. We're just going to go back up to, doesn't really matter, go up to exposure, that's fine. And we're going to take our highlights and we're going to bring those highlights down. And then we're going to just brush over this area here that was starting to get a little too washed out. So again, let's take a look at our before and after. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now the next thing I'm going to want to do is add a new brush. Big surprise there. Add a new brush, and then I'm going to just go down, and I want to get something that's going to enhance the feathers. So let's take a look and see if I've got one in place. So feather shadows up. So I'm going to bring the feather shadows up. So we'll click on that one, and then we're going to go bring this up, and we'll just bring this across the feathers, brightening those feathers as we go. And this one does seem a little extreme, so we're going to pull that back, the opacity back on that just a little bit. Great. And you can see on these masks, you can see what each mask does. If you hover over it, it'll bring you right to the mask and make it nice and red to see exactly what it is that you're working with. You can also name these if you like, and that's a pretty good way to keep track of what each mask does, because you're going to probably stack up a bunch of masks, and that's a great way to go. Because if I wanted to go back into one of these other masks in the eye or the beak or something, I could go back to that mask and redo it or rebuild it or change it around. So this gives you a lot of freedom inside of Lightroom. So let's do one more mask here. We're going to grab the brush, and we're going to go into our brushes again. And we'll go to green pop, and what this does is this just enhances the green. So let's go ahead and bring this around to the tones that are green, which is of course most of this background. And of course, again, that's pretty extreme, so I'm just going to pull this back a little bit. And I usually try to make these brushes a little more extreme than they are necessarily usable, because it's really easy just to pull back on that. You can enhance them a little bit, but it's just easier for me to just pull back on it. So this is where we've ended up. Let's take a look. We've got a before and after. Let's move that off of there. Before and after. So now we've got eyes that we can see. We've got the beak that looks normal. It's not too bright, but it looks good. Probably the only other thing I would do is maybe put a vignette on this. So let's come on over here to these presets, and we can make another, come over to our presets down to vignettes, and we'll do a medium vignette. We'll just click on that, and that actually looks pretty good. Let's turn this off so we can see all of our masks. And I'm liking what this has done. So now that the image is completed, we're ready to move on. Now that the next step that I would typically go into is going to be into sharpening. So I do a lot of sharpening inside of Photoshop, and I'll show that to you one day. But for today's workflow, I'm going to show you how I would sharpen inside of Lightroom. So we're going to click plus, but this time we're going to do subject select, and let's see how it does. Should make a nice selection of this. Yep, So now we're going to come down here to detail, and this is where our sharpness comes from. So we can just sharpen that just a little bit, add some sharpening. We don't want to add noise. I'd probably want to take a little bit of noise away. And again, let's take a look at this at 100%. As we go to sharpen this, that looks pretty decent. And again, it's super important to start with a sharp image. If you start with a sharp image, you can do lots of things with this. But if you have an out of focus image or an image that's blurred from motion blur, it's really tough to get good detail out of it. So these are my settings that we're going to do simply on the sharpening of this. And it looks like we'll put it back to fill. Move this out of the way so we can see this. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So before and after. Brings attention to the bird. We've removed some distractions. And I think we're good to go. If you're enjoying this kind of content, take a second to click the like button and then subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon so YouTube will notify you when I put out a new video. While I read and answer all the questions and comments in the section below, you might want to contact me directly. Feel free to send me an email to terry@imagelight.com, and I'll answer back and put you on my mailing list and let you know when a new video is released or a newsletter or something along those lines. All right, let's take a look at it before and after. This is the image that we started with. Good looking shot, we knew, because it was sharp. As we zoomed up, we could see that it was sharp. We also then, so that's how we started. That's the image we chose because we knew it was sharp. Then we went in, did a little bit of retouching, removed this little branch here that was in the way. We also went in, lightened up the eye, lightened up the feathers, lightened up the beak and saturated the beak a little bit, saturated the greenery in the background, put a little vignette on it, and then did a little sharpening. So those are all the simple steps of how we get to an end result that you can now print or share on social media. So let me show you how you make your own brushes. So in a case like this in development, you saw how much faster my work was. I wasn't dealing with sliders a lot. I was just clicking on brushes, making a new mask, clicking on new brushes, and you can really zoom through your edits pretty quickly that way. But you have to have the brushes so that it works for what you're doing. So mine are great. I'd be very happy if you bought my brushes, but even if you have them, you may want to build your own brushes. So let me show you how to do your own thing, build your own brushes. And then if you don't want to buy brushes, that's cool, but at least you can make your own brushes to really improve your workflow. So here's how that works. Come over here, go into Develop module, click the masking button again, go to Brush, and this is where it starts off. This is our default, is generally going to be custom. So what you want to do is you want to say, okay, what is it that I want to do on this brush? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our brush and let's just, for simplicity's sake, we're going to brush around the bird's head. So as you saw on when I set this up, I had this on auto mask. So that makes masking out the head of this bird fairly easy. So now what we can do is we can start fiddling with this. And as soon as you start fiddling with any of these items here, the mask goes away and shows you what the results are. So let's go ahead and say we want to lighten it up. We'll do it at pretty extreme here on YouTube so you can see what that looks like. And so now that we've done that, we can say, well, let's also go in and we'll make this a little warmer. So we'll add a little bit of yellow, we'll add some magenta to it. And you can actually go in and add some texture if you wanted to, all in the same brush. I don't recommend that. I would just say make a separate brush. You'll see how easy this is to do. So we just did the exposure, basically, a really bright exposure on this, and warmed it up a little bit. So now when we come into our preset, click on Custom, come down to the very bottom, so past all the brushes, and into Save Current Settings as a new preset. So we click on that, and then we're going to call this, we'll just call this Super Bright. So you name your brush. It's important to name your brush so you can actually find it later. So we'll hit Create. And now let's go ahead and bring up a new image. Let's open a new image and see how this actually works. So let's go into Mask, and we come down and click Brush. By the way, another little shortcut here that's worth doing, we'll undo this here. We go to brush and we can click this and go right into this by just hitting the letter K, right? So let's try this to speed up our workflow. We just hit the letter K and it brings us up right into the brush. It makes us a mask and we're all good to go. So let me show you that again. We come in here and we hit K. K is the letter and the shortcut that creates a mask and then also creates a brush mask, which is what we're looking to do. You can see up here it's titled brush. So just that simple letter of K on your keyboard gets you right into a brush. Now, the last one is a default exposure, but what we're going to do is scroll down until we find super bright. There it is right there. So now we can come in with our brush and start painting however it is we want to do it. So that's how simple it is to make a new brush. So it does take some time originally to build these brushes to do what you want, and you need to label them really refined so that you know the differences between the brushes. But the workflow is pretty darn simple, right? We're just going to go through and make new brushes. Every time you hit K, you're making a new brush. You come in here and build it however it is you want. And you can just find it if they're easily labeled, easy to get to. I have a ton of brushes that I have here. Also have some black and white brushes. But when you make your own brushes, you can start stockpiling them, and then those will be the ones that you really gravitate towards and you're going to use. You can also augment one of my brushes if you like. For instance, if you went into, for instance, Beak Enhance, let's go ahead and do that. And now we're going to, let's say the shadows were lifted a little too high and the highlights were lifted a little too much. Let's go in and we'll zoom up so we'll see how this works. And this, of course, is an out of focus picture of a hawk, so bear with me here. So we can see that's a little too bright. So let's go ahead and bring the highlights down a little bit. There we go. Bring our shadows back a little bit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and pull this down, and we're going to make, that was Beak Enhance, so we're going to go here and we're going to go Beak Enhance 2. So now when we're working inside of Lightroom, we just grab a whole new image here. Another one that's out of focus. Isn't that great? So we hit the letter K, and we can see right here we have Beak Enhance is Beak Enhance 2 is right at the top, last one that we did. And now we can just go in, click on that, and start painting away. And that's a bought brush. So if you ever buy brushes from somebody, you can augment them and make them your own and just tweak them the way you like. That way you can always get back to them and do whatever kind of edits that you're looking to do. If you'd like to order my wildlife brushes, go over to my website at imagelight.com. Go to the digital products page, scroll until you find the wildlife brushes, and you can order them right there from the website. Thank you in advance for supporting this channel by any of your purchases here on the digital products page. It's a pretty simple process. It's done the very same way, but this is a simple way to make your own brushes, and you can get through your edits a lot faster and with the custom look that you're looking for. Until next time, this is Terry Vanderhyde. Thanks for watching.